and just give me like character interactions that aren't, hey, how you doing? I'm okay. Haven't seen you in 10 years. It's been a long time. Yeah. Yeah, give me more! Give me more than that! I want more than that! Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching, and enjoy the video. We're going to go ahead, and we're going to move on to the first part of my show, and that is my review for Ahsoka Episode 8, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Listen, they called it something else, but that was the naming scheme. I'm like, you fucking ripped off the Narnia. That's exactly what you did. You ripped off that title from the most popular of those books, which is fine. Listen, Star Wars borrows from a lot of different, books and properties, chat, and certainly, they've been inspired by a number of sci-fi and a lot of fantasy books too, and just throwing the stuff from C.S. Lewis as well. But I was like, that is straight up The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That is what they're referring to. I think it's called like, I don't know, The Warrior, the Witch, and the Warlord or something. I'm just like, okay, I see what you're doing there, which is fine. I thought that was cute. And again, for people that need a bit of a synopsis, background, a little history as to what the hell is going on in this show, as Thrawn finally prepares to leave with his mysterious cargo, our heroes race to prevent the escape of the Grand Admiral and battle his forces and the dark magic of the Night Sisters. As I've been doing for this show, for these reviews for these episodes, I've been talking about my overall thoughts on the series, so far. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I as I said before, I've been somewhat mixed, and now I've been like really mixed on Ahsoka, thus far. It's great to see again, these animated characters, from whether it be Star Wars Rebels or Star Wars: The Clone Wars, two shows that Dave Filoni created and ran and had great success with. It's great to see them transition over into live action. In theory, on paper, I think that's great. But as I've said before, I think a number of the choices that Filoni and the other filmmakers have done haven't really worked for me all that much. And there's some consistent problems in regards to how a number of the characters are being written and directed. For whatever reason, Filoni is making many of the characters in this show as flat and as stoic as possible. And I really don't understand why that is. And it's not every character. Like, we'll get to it later on. But there's a few that I was like, okay, this person actually has like a lot of personality here in their brain, and they feel like, wow, they absolutely feel like their animated counterpart. But for the majority of the cast, I just feel like they're so flat. Their speech pattern is a little off and always comes across as being very kind of distant. Emotionally detached is a term I would often use to describe many of the emotional moments in this show. And to me, it's just been really distracting and weird, especially because I've seen these characters before, many hours worth of them, and they're not like that, like at all. And so it just doesn't really work for me, and I don't think it has served or represented those original characters very well. And I think, sadly, it continues on even in this episode. And I don't want to say this will be like a spoil. I mean, I'm going to spoil certain things, certain aspects of this last episode. Again, there's some stuff that's been hinted at, like, oh, is this what they're building towards? It's like, especially in regards to like the stormtroopers and things, and they build towards that, and we see that, and so that'll be kind of the stuff that I'll spoil, honestly. But to be honest, there's just not a lot to spoil in this particular episode because not a lot happens in terms of propelling the plot forward, in my opinion. Yes, there's a lot of action. This is probably the most action-heavy episode yet. There's no question about that. But in terms of the plot progression, in terms of the characterization, there's just not a lot there. And some characters are barely in to begin with. Some people who are the most interesting characters introduced in this show, original characters, such as Balin Skull and Shin Hati. They're hardly even in this episode, chat. I think they maybe get like 10 or 20 seconds each, if that. I think I'm being generous. But listen, I'll be positive at the top. I think there are some really fun action sequences in this episode, particularly the duel between Ahsoka and Morgan Elsbeth. Or Morgan Elsbeth, she was introduced in Mandalorian Season 2. She was a follower of Thrawn, like a governor of some planet, and she's been brought back here, and she was a part of the process to return, Thrawn to the galaxy. And, we got a bit of a rematch between Ahsoka and Elsbeth, though I realized, like, during the duel, which, again, the choreography and the cinematography for that battle was handled very well, and it moved at a terrific pace. But I know, I was like, oh yeah, these characters haven't like talked to each other since like their encounter in Mandalorian Season 2. I was like, oh yeah. So I feel like there's a little, I don't know, there's not much emotion, not much at stake between their battle. It would have been actually nice if they had more of a back and forth, but they literally just, they don't have any screen time together until this very moment, unless I'm misremembering something. And I have to say, like, for the lightsaber, for the battle itself, for their lightsaber battle, sword battle, whatever you want to call it, it was a nice, I thought, blending of original and prequel trilogy lightsaber duels that wasn't like too outlandish or over the top. I also thought that, because I've always been kind of annoyed. I know a lot of people like love the prequels, like, lightsaber battles. Like the only one I like is the one between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Darth Maul. And like, yes, they're definitely, kind of moving those lightsabers pretty fast and throwing them around like batons to an extent. But, just the use of double blade, how that operates in the combat, that, I thought that was well done. After that, I've never liked any of the lightsaber battles in the prequel movies, including Attack the Clones. I thought the choreography and how that was all shot was really, really sloppy with, Count Dooku, Anakin, Obi-Wan. I thought the Yoda thing was a gimmick. I really disliked the two lightsaber battles, or the multiple lightsaber battles in Revenge of the Sith. I know people are saying, like, those are the best ones. Like, I don't like that, where everyone's doing 15 fucking flippy jumps in the air, and, like, you can do literally anything with the Force. I'm just like, what is this? It reminds me of Star Wars The Force Unleashed, where everyone's like a fucking Super Saiyan all of a sudden with a lightsaber. I'm just like, I just do not like that. But some people, they love that shit. It's just not for me. It's just not for me. So I liked what they did with the duel here. I thought it was a blending of both. It wasn't too crazy, but there definitely felt like there was a lot of like mixed martial arts incorporated into the fight. A lot of grappling, which I thought was pretty unusual for a lightsaber battle, but in a good way. And so I thought that was handled pretty well. I also really liked the sequence in which Ezra and Sabine were battling the two Death Troopers on top of that like tower. There was like this cool sense of brutality to it for the most part. And, aside from the bad guys just like throwing our heroes around occasionally, which I'm starting to hate that. Like, I'm noticing that more and more. It's like, let me grab you and then throw you instead of, I don't know, shoot you or strangle you. I'm just going to throw you away. Put more distance between the two of us so you have more time to scramble and put together like an idea of how you're going to beat me. I still, in any case, I know I'm saying I was being positive, I'm being negative. I like the intimate savagery of it. Also, Aman Esfandi, who plays Ezra, and along with Lars Mikkelsen to a bit of a lesser extent, they were the episode's standouts. Though some of the material they had to work with, I don't think was the best. At that point, my compliments of the episode, and I guess for the series overall, end there. By the time the credits rolled, I was asking myself, what was the point of this series? I know it's called Ahsoka and probably should be about that character, but it felt more like an epilogue to the Rebels animated series. I guess the whole point of the show, it was really about rescuing Ezra Bridger and bringing back Grand Admiral Thrawn to set him up as a potential villain for Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie, which may or may not happen, given the day of the week. The two big mysteries of the show were pretty much left completely unresolved. Those being, what is Thrawn transporting to the Star Wars galaxy in those boxes, in those almost looks like coffins, right? And what is Balin's skull looking for? None of those things are resolved at all by the end of the show. And I was kind of left with a pretty empty feeling for the end of the episode. It's like, yeah, you filled it with a lot of action, lightsaber battles and blaster battles and, villainous monologuing to a degree. But, nothing really was accomplished other than, there's Ezra and there's Thrawn and they're going back home. That's really it. And this is the other thing that's been consistently bothering me, and I mentioned this during my review for Fiona and Cake, because I was comparing how those two shows write women. And I think the performances of a lot of, again, it's I don't think it's the actor's fault. I think it's the material that they have to work with and how they're directed. Again, like I always like to say, chat, you could be the most talented actor in the world, but if you're given a shit script, you're given shit direction, you're going to give a shit performance. And I think the performances of Ahsoka, Sabine Wren, and Harrison Dooler are just truly bizarre in terms of how stoic and flat they are. It's like, this is like this big climactic battle of this specific show, right? And there's got to be a lot of emotion, because there's a lot at stake, and I just feel like everyone's kind of at a solid 3. Not everybody. I think, Ezra Bridger, he's the one that feels the most emotionally invested in everything that's going on. It's like he was told, be like your character from the show. He's like, I can do that from the animated series. Yeah, I can do that. And I think he's accomplished that. I think he's done that very well. But here, for whatever reason, I don't get it, why so many of these female characters are written to be so flat. It's almost like Dave Filoni in the writing process, and he also told the other directors, hey, when we're directing the women, make sure that they're always kind of understated and don't have them show emotion. It's like in their mind, it almost feels like, and I don't like this term anymore, the strong female character. I don't like that. It's like well-written female character. Characters need to be well-written, not strong, quote-unquote strong. It's almost as if in order to show off like a badass woman in this world, they need to be stoic and they need to show no emotion. I'm like, why? That doesn't make any sense to me. Especially I recently watching a series, which I know it sounds funny when I say, yes, Adventure Time spinoff Fiona and Cake, but that show provided me such great characterization for a wonderful female character who was flawed, who had all sorts of issues, but realizes that through the series and becomes better and realizes that it's not about what she wants but what she needs right now, right? And she shows a whole spectrum of emotion throughout that show, and I was completely invested in her journey. But here, I'm not invested in any of these women's journeys, because I don't feel like I got a sense of who they are, because they're not giving me anything. And so I really do feel like they were underserved by a lack of direction and writing, and just a kind of a lack of inspiration. And it was very frustrating, because I like those characters from their respective shows, from Clone Wars and from Rebels, where they do go through a spectrum of emotions and they do change over time. But here it's like they're just stagnant, and I really dislike that. And I have no idea as to why they're being treated this way. It's very bizarre to me, and I want to know if anyone else has those issues, because I think it's really undercutting the potential for them to be interesting and stand out among the brevy of other Star Wars characters. Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn, though good with what he had to work with, they never really got to show off his wisdom, his intelligence, and tactical brilliance that made the character so popular in Legends and Heir of the Empire and in the Thrawn trilogy, written by Timothy, Zahn. By the end, he just barely gets away by the skin of his teeth and doesn't really set himself apart from the decision-making of other Imperial admirals and generals and Moffs, and throughout Star Wars and in those various films and other adaptations. He's just kind of, it's like he's menacing in what he's saying, and you get kind of like an inkling. It's like, okay, he's definitely intellectual, but I never thought they really showcased his brilliance, it's almost like they were telling him we got to do it more understated. It's like, no, I want him to monologue his ass off, okay? I want to hear a very long speech and him discussing, like, this is my philosophy, this is what's worked for me, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, let him do that. Be a little more broad. And they just don't. There's just not enough material for him there. And it's like, I see it. So you could do so much great stuff with this character. He's like almost there, but I just feel like on the creative side, that character was let down in the long run. And it's not his fault. It's not Lars Mikkelsen's fault at all. I think he's well cast. I think he has the perfect voice for it. I think he has the mannerisms down, but it's just like, again, it's the material that he's given. I just don't think it's good enough. Not nearly good enough. Now, this is a bit of the big spoiler for the episode, so, Thrawn's obviously been lost in another galaxy for the last 10 years, along with Ezra, and apparently he came across some Night Sisters who are basically witches. They're the witches of the Star Wars universe. And, we've seen them in video games, we've seen them in books, we've seen them in the animated shows and things. And, they have, they are able to use the Force, but except in a different way, right? Also, like Marin from the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. That's that character, too. She's from them, right? And people are always suspecting, well, those stormtroopers that are in Thrawn's army, are they like zombies? Is that what they are? Because they seem like super badass. That's the thing. I was so excited. I was like, oh, shit, here we go. We're going to see these stormtroopers. They've been lost in this other galaxy for 10 years. These guys are going to be badasses because their armor's all scuffed up and, thrown together with, this weird bandaging. And it's, all these different metals that are placed on their armor, like this gold metal and silver metal. I was like, oh, this looks really cool. But these guys are, veterans, so they're going to know what to do. And, nope, they're as useless as every stormtrooper that we've ever seen before, chat. They suck. They're terrible. They just fucking run forward and they get shot and that they die. That's pretty much what they do. Despite looking really, really cool, they just die. And in this episode, they introduced the idea of Death Troopers, which has always been a part of Star Wars lore to a degree. There was this novel series where it was called, I think it was called Death Troopers. And they're zombie stormtroopers. It's like a Star Wars horror novel, which I think that's a fun concept. It's like, oh, we were going to see it here. It's like, oh, shit. And in the episode, they after they get fucking decimated by Sabine and Ezra and Ahsoka, Thrawn asked the witches, hey, can you resurrect them from the dead? I'm like, sure. And they do that. It's like, oh, we're going to get zombie stormtroopers. And they suck too. They're just as bad as if they were alive, and they get shot and they get stabbed and they fall over again. It's like, well, that's not cool. It's like, well, they keep getting up. It's like, okay, you got to keep, but then it's easy to dispatch them anyway. And so I was like, well, that was kind of lame, except the one part where, and this is where it gets confusing. We were talking about this before the review. Deadpool mentioned this, saying that, well, yes, you had Death Troopers in Legends, zombie stormtroopers, but then you had Death Troopers introduced in canon with the all-black armored stormtroopers, which we saw introduced for the first time in Rogue One, which were really cool. These the black ops, commando stormtroopers, where actually they're competent. And we get a sequence where we see two of those guys fighting Sabine and Ezra, and I actually liked that scene. I thought that was actually pretty good. I thought that was handled well. But outside of that, the other zombie troopers, well, that was kind of a waste because they're just falling over most of the time. They're falling over. They're tripping over themselves. They're getting shot. They can't shoot for shit. And it's you had an opportunity, hey, Thrawn could say, these aren't your usual stormtroopers. I trained these guys. But no, they're doing the exact same things that you've seen stormtroopers do for decades. And there was a cool opportunity where you could have shown them as badasses, but you didn't. Also, big disappointment is there's no Baylan Skoll or Shin Hati in this episode, really. They're shown at the very end when they're kind of doing a wrap up, where's everybody? Kind of the state of things at the end of the series. And Baylan's sitting on a statue that's pointing at a light in the distance, and it's okay. And then Shin Hati's gonna be, I don't know, a warlord now with these really shitty marauders who they're just as useless as the stormtroopers. I'm like, honey, I think you're better off recruiting the turtle people in your army than these guys who are getting their asses kicked just as much as the stormtroopers are. And so their whole plot line's not resolved, and it's sad because I really like both of those characters. There's something different there that's been added to the Star Wars universe. They're not Jedi, they're not Sith. There's something new, and they have their own philosophy. And Balin's. I think Ray Stevenson's. Again, the late great Ray Stevenson, rest in peace. He brought so much to this show, and I really liked him. And then to see that his entire arc's not even complete, it's just like, well, that's disappointing. And so they can do one of two things now. It's either they completely just, well, we're not going to cover that, which is disappointing because that was actually interesting. That's a mystery. That's like, oh, what's he been seeking? What's he been looking for this entire time? Because I don't know, but he's been looking for something. And like the other thing is they either just ignore it or they recast, which I think they have to recast now. Because it's like, this is a huge thing that's left unresolved, and I feel like you're going to have to go into details about that. But, they certainly don't in this episode. And, like, is Shin Hati just going to be, like, she's just going to be wrangling these guys? These marauders? Like, that's her path? Really? Okay. I mean, it's not going to work out. That's just not going to work out. But, okay, if sure, I guess. And then we get down to a chat. And here's the thing. I know I'm sorry I'm being so negative because I had a lot of hopes for this show. And, initially I was like, oh, I really like those first couple episodes. And I think the last episode I really liked. I think it was episode 6. I thought episode 6 was the strongest. But then this previous episode and then this one, it's just, I don't know. It's just so flat. Like, I don't hate it. I don't think it's, like, as bad as Obi-Wan. Certainly not as bad as Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Book of Boba Fett. Or maybe Mandalorian Season 3, but it's just so middle of the road. That's what it is. It's just coasting. It's on cruise control. And I think just, the lack of stakes and drama and the underwhelming stoic performances is just reminiscent of the way George Lucas directs actors in the prequels. It's just this permeating flatness to many of these episodes that's just very frustrating. Even I forgot to mention this. I want to mention this. This is another spoiler, by the way. Ezra does get to go back home. And while Sabine and Ahsoka and Baylan and Shin are stranded in that other galaxy, right? And, Ezra goes back to the New Republic fleet, and he walks off his ship, and he's confronted by Hera Syndulla, pretty much the person who was his, mother in a way, who, watched him and raised him, and took care of him. And she was very much the dead mother to all those people, part of that Rebels crew, right? She kind of held, she was the glue that held together. And he walks off that ship, and I'm thinking, do it. You got to hug him, have that emotional embrace. You haven't seen him in 10 years. He was pretty much your son. I know you have a new son that you had with Kanan, who's dead now, but you raised him as your own. And there is just a profound lack of emotion. She's just she looks like she had indigestion when she saw him. Oh, you're back. It's hug him. No, why aren't you hugging him? You should be oh my God. It's there is nothing wrong. This is what's bothering me. It's they said to a lot of the female, don't show any emotion. Why? Show emotion. I want you to embrace him because you haven't seen him in a decade and you loved him. And it's this weird, confused, blank stare. Just the entire time. I'm God damn it. What, why are they doing that? And it really bothered me. It really bothered me because you needed to have an emotional embrace in that moment. He's the one, and again, the actor who plays, Ezra Bridger, he's the one that's actually bringing some emotion to it, some levity to that scene. It's I'm back, I'm home, and he's not getting nothing in return from Mary Elizabeth Winstead. And again, I don't blame her. I blame the writing and I blame the direction, but that scene needed to be emotional, and it was not. It was flat, like so many of the other scenes in this episode. And then it kind of it brings me to this kind of conclusion at this point. I don't think Dave Filoni has the live action filmmaking chops to direct or oversee a Star Wars TV show, and certainly not a film. Because if this is what he's going to give me, in whether they do a season 2, I don't even know. Who even knows at this point? what's happening in the state of Star Wars television, or really just state of Disney TV. On Disney Plus, they seem to be cutting so many different projects at this point because they've been losing so much money over the last several years. Certainly this year, Chad, it's one of their worst performing years of all time. I don't know if we're gonna get a season 2, but if this is what his movie's gonna be, if this is what his adaptation of Heir of the Empire is gonna be, I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want it because that story needs to be incredibly impactful. That is viewed by many people as the true successor. Initially, it was the true successor to the original trilogy back in the early 90s when there wasn't any, when there was a complete vacuum of Star Wars content. That's what that was. And there was so much cool stuff that they did in those original books. And then am I just going to see a flat version, a flaccid version of that story, a truncated version of that story? I'm like, I don't really want that. I think that's very disappointing if that's what they're going to end up doing. And maybe he'll be a good filmmaker one day, a good live action filmmaker one day, but I don't think he's there yet. And I don't think he should have a project like this at this point, and certainly not a movie. So yeah, I'm disappointed by this show. Again, I don't think it's as bad as Book of Boba Fett or Obi-Wan Kenobi or like Mando season 3. It is just so middle of the road. It has its ups, it certainly has its downs, it has its good moments, and it has a lot of bad moments, but yeah, it's a shame because I feel like you could have done a lot here. There's no excuse of the material that you're given. You need a different writer in there. You need a different class of filmmaker. And I've been saying this for the longest time. Everyone's saying like, I don't want everyone to be like Andor. It's like, no, I understand that. I don't want at the time I was like, no, not every Star Wars movie or TV show should be like Andor. And I was like, no, screw that. Yeah, Star Wars needs to be like Andor, okay? Because that show gave me the stakes, it gave me the drama, it gave me the emotion that was certainly missing from here, okay? That's what Star Wars needs to do. It needs to have just this grand vision and this perfected execution, all right? Because that is not on display at all in something like Ahsoka. So please give me more Star Wars like Andor, where they've seemingly have thought everything through. Shoot on location. I mean, there's so much volume. I don't like the volume. There's so much volume use in this show. It's like, I'm there, and they are not in an actual world anywhere. This is just a set, and it feels that way. And just give me like character interactions that aren't, hey, how you doing? I'm okay. Haven't seen you in 10 years. It's been a long time. Yeah, give me more! Give me more than that! I want more than that! And I don't know if Dave Filoni's going to do that. I really don't. So, I'm repeating myself at this point. Ahsoka, it's a mediocre, middle-of-the-road show that deserved to be a lot better, especially with the material that they were working from and adapting from. And, yeah, I was disappointed by it. But, chat, that's just my opinion on Ahsoka episode 8, and I guess the series overall. I guess this first season limited series, who even knows what it's got. They were even confused. They were putting out like, oh, the last episode of this limited series, and they changed it on the social media. It's like, oh, it's season 1. This is like, what are you doing? One hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. I don't get it. So yeah, but that's how I feel, Chad. What about you guys out there? What did you think of Ahsoka episode 8 and Ahsoka season 1? Let me know. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.